Houston lawyer Ted Borrego has 50 plus years of providing legal advice to the global oil and gas industry. And he's got some very interesting thoughts on what's going to happen in the next little while in Venezuela since the United States took out the President Maduro. So, welcome to the interview, Ted.
Thank you, Markham. Yes, the first thing that we have to realize is that he took out Maduro. That's all he did. He has not changed the regime. He has not changed the statutes, the legislation. He has not confiscated in any way the oil that is in the ground. And he has not provided any kind of framework where that oil can legitimately be moved to the United States.
So, one of the things that came out of the meeting this past week with the oil company executives is they said very, very clearly that the existing legal framework is regulatory framework will not permit them to go back in. It's too risky, and so that would seem to be number one if Trump to accomplish Trump's goal of rebuilding the industry, would it not?
Yes, the problem is that there it really isn't a mechanism that exists right now to do what Trump expects the oil companies to do. The existing structure is structured for building and discovering and producing new oil fields. It is not built to permit the reworking of the existing oil fields. That ends up with a significant problem from both sides of the fence. The oil companies don't know what the laws might be, and neither do the Venezuelans. That takes the risk factor up several notches.
What in my audience, I think there's an assumption that since the United States took out Maduro, it somehow now controls the Venezuelan government and can essentially set the rules, set the laws, and do whatever it wants. And that does, okay, we agree that's not the case. But doesn't that argue that the Trump administration had no plan A, no plan B, really no plan at all, aside from taking out the president?
That's absolutely right. They don't seem to have any kind of advice that has been given to them about what the current legislation is and how it would have to be changed, if at all. I mean, there's an argument that can be built that says, no, they don't have to change that, but that's kind of getting into the hyper technicals. But it's apparent that nobody understands what is going on from the administration standpoint. Number one, you have to understand that the United States, oil and gas and other minerals are frequently owned by the people that have the surface or have come to own part of the minerals. That is not true in the rest of the world, and it's certainly not true in Venezuela. Those minerals, those oil and gas, is owned by the state.
Yeah, Canadians will appreciate that because that's the way it's set up in Canada. About 80% of mineral rights are owned by either the federal government or the
Sure.
provincial government. Um, Ted, one question I'll ask it and then we'll see if you want to answer it. But we've talked a lot here in energy media about how the Trump administration is driven by ideology. And it does things like puts out the 2025 national security strategy, says all the resources in Western Hemisphere are for the use of the United States. You know, these grandiose rhetorical kind of pronouncements, but then they don't have the machinery to put in place a strategy and a plan to actually follow through with what they've announced. Is that a fair observation in this case?
Oh, yeah. I think that that's been sort of an attitude that was prevalent in the United States through oh gosh, for the first half of the last century. There was that's what led to a number of expropriations and problems that existed in Latin America. Number one, the Mexicans threw us out. Number two, in the Honduras and Nicaragua. The United Fruit Company thought it ran everything, and that those days are over with. It's not going to happen. And while there might be some ideology about it's all ours if we all we have to do is go get it, there is also a very strong counter ideology in Latin America among the people that it's my country, don't tell me what to do. Almost a reflection of what hold up the mirror to the Trump administration.
Yeah, in this case, the Trump's favorite slogan is "America First," and it's like the Venezuelans are saying "Venezuela first." And uh,
Absolutely.
Ted, can you comment on some of the unrest that we're seeing in Venezuela now? Like I'm hearing stories about the Chavistas, these armed motorcycle gangs that kind of exercise authority within the slums, and that they're doing things like having roadblocks and demanding evidence. Like if you have any connection to the Americans, they're not happy about that. Can you comment on that?
Not being there, of course, it's kind of a little hard to figure out exactly what's going on. There's an awful lot of hype in the media. But yeah, I can certainly see what's happening now. There has been a resurgence of Venezuela first, if you as you put it in one way, where people are actively unhappy with the meddling, if you will, of the United States. And they're not going to be putting up with a lot of that. The regime has been sort of quiet about that. They themselves have not said anything, but I think that's because they don't want to see U.S. boots on the ground, and they think by being a little quiet, that's all right. But on the other hand, the military and the Chavistas, as you call them, uh, they're not part of the regime in a sense. Of course, the military is, but nobody knows what the military is doing right now, and that's always uncomfortable. They're the guys with the really big guns.
So yeah, now you've had, decades of experience advising oil companies about going into other countries. And is it not fair to say that social unrest, political unrest, chaos, lack of, the rule of law isn't applied, the government can't maintain social order, all of that is anathema to oil companies who need stability and certainty in order to make multi-year, multi-billion dollar investments?
Absolutely. The thing that you have to realize is that the oil companies at the higher levels are basically diplomats. They need to understand what the culture is, what the stability of the culture is, and why they can expect over the next umpty ump years that there will be that same stability in the future. Let's take Canada, for example. That's a wonderful country to go invest in. Why? Because we're pretty sure that even after Mark Carney has gone to his reward, that 50 years from now it's not going to be significantly different. Venezuela, I have no clue. Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, they're all kind of right wing right now, but who knows what happens tomorrow. Look at Brazil, right wing, left wing. Next year, who knows? And that's the problem. You don't put money into a country where the risks are too high. The political risk is high.
Okay, that gets us into an interesting situation because we know now Venezuela is all sorts of problems that we've talked about earlier. ExxonMobil, in particular, CEO Darren Woods was very vocal about saying that the way things are now, it's uninvestable. Venezuela is uninvestable. But how then might the Americans, is there a path where the Americans can come in and get, create the kind of uh, peace, order, and good government, as we say in Canada, where oil companies, like where Darren Woods would say, okay, now I'm fine. I think we can invest in Venezuela.
Oh, yeah, we've done that before. Let's go in there and kick all these guys out. We will put in our guy, and then we will have stability for a number of years. That did not work out very well in Iran, for example. We did get rid of Mossadegh and we put in the Shah, but that was not a full-time, that was not a forever solution. We're looking at the same kinds of things here. Yes, we can go in, we can kick out the Maduro regime or what's left of it. We have larger guns and all that sort of thing. But eventually, the Venezuelans will get it all back somehow. It just does not force does not seem to be the way you can handle these things. Being polite, taking your time, and looking for stability. Let's take a quick look at Saudi Arabia, and we it's investable, to use the term of the Exxon guys. But you understand that oil companies, although we have there is this great mythology about how rich they are, the return on investment and the amount of percentage of net income isn't that great. And they're not going to go out and throw a lot of it away unless they just happen to get caught there. And why go buy it?
Yeah, that's something that's been the case of for a number of years now, was the oil and gas sector has underperformed for investors relative to other sectors, and the shareholders in oil companies are demanding the highest possible return, the most capital discipline, the most risk-averse strategies. And all of that would are, like Darren Wood has got shareholders looking over his shoulders at the kinds of decisions he's going to make around Venezuela. And if they don't like them, he's going to get his leash yanked. Is that a fair observation?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, you know, uh, hey, if you want to go do a stable investment right now, China is a lot better looking than Venezuela if you're an oil company.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. So stability is really important. Now you have you alluded to this a little bit earlier in the interview, but you have a very, very interesting family history in the oil industry. Your dad, and I think even your grandfather was involved, but and your father was expropriated a number of times. Maybe you could tell the story.
Well, twice actually, and real close two other times. His expropriation, the first one he suffered was in Mexico in 1938 with the Great Expropriation. And it was hilarious because everybody was called back to New York for conversations. And my dad, and this assistant field superintendent, was a senior man for the Standard Oil in New Jersey in Mexico. So he was on the phone with the Rockefeller brothers and the entire board, explaining to them what was going on. And he was able to do that until he went to jail. And then he eventually got out. 1964, my father took the first rig into Libya in 1955. They sold that company out. And in 1964, the Libyans expropriated. And he spent months testifying at a trial in Geneva, or an arbitration in Geneva, about that. The problem that we saw, and that he pointed out to me as a young lawyer and as a young man, was, look, when they expropriate you, they take the value of your infrastructure, which may be billions of dollars, mind you. But the reserves in the ground, no, that's ours. We never sold it to you. We keep that. And that's where the value is. And that's and that lesson has been learned over and over and over again in the oil business. If you can't minimize your risk, then you suffer expropriation, and whatever you get paid isn't enough.
Right, and one of the Trump's rationales for removing Maduro was that there have been expropriations of U.S. oil company assets in the past, and somehow those companies need to get it back, and the United States needs to, be compensated for those expropriations. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of historical precedent for that.
No, what are they going to get back? They never had it in the first place. The classic model today in the oil business is a split between the oil company and the national oil company, and it varies from 70-30 to 50-50 to something else. And the oil company allows the Americans, or the oil country allows the oil company to take oil in compensation for having taken risk. And then they get to keep some of that oil in the future for profit, but they never owned the oil. They never have. I mean, like I said, the United States is kind of weird.
Yeah,
Individuals here own oil.
yeah, I would agree. I mean, in the United States, as I understand it, the mineral rights are owned privately, unless you're on federal lands, Bureau of Land Management lands. And but in Canada, we're kind of the same way as the rest of the world. We don't have a state-owned oil company, but what happens is the provincial government owns the oil reserves, gas reserves, and then leases out land where the resource is located, leases it to the oil company, and then takes a royalty. And in the case of the oil sands, which is most relevant here, it's after all the capital, the initial upfront capital is paid off, then they have a very healthy royalty, and everybody does very well. But is it fair to say that because the U.S. situation is different with respect to mineral rights, that the understanding of Trump and his team, like people like Stephen Miller and even Chris Wright, the energy secretary, they don't really understand how things get done outside of the U.S.
No, they don't, and they don't understand how things are done with uh, with the oil companies and the mindset of the oil companies. I mean, sure, there's going to be somebody out there that's going to be willing to go down there and take the risk, but not the big boys. They're not going to go out there and put their necks on the line until there is a stable Venezuela that looks like it's going to last for many years. Doesn't make any difference to them what the ideology is, by the way. They just need stability. Just like I said, China, that's stable. Who cares about the ideology? I can get the oil.
Right. One of the things, there's a kind of a side story here that hasn't received a lot of attention, is that Guyana is not that far away from Venezuela. And Guyana has just had an enormous field discovered where the break-even costs are very, very low. And I was reading a piece by Reuters last year where they said, look, at $30 break-even, that's very low. The majors are super majors are flooding into Guyana because they're worried that maybe oil demand will decline after 2030, and they want to be the ones, the last barrel standing, and they can do it in cheap fields like Guyana. And so it would seem like that the Guyana fits their business model. Venezuela, absolutely at the other end of the spectrum, does not fit their business model.
Sure. One of the things I believe Ed Hers yesterday told you that the cost of getting a barrel of oil out of the ground in Venezuela is $80. And they're going to sell it in at the Gulf Coast for 40, uh, assuming that. And you can't make that up on volume.
Okay. Well, you could make a lot more losses in volume when you're so.
Absolutely. If you need the losses for tax purposes, this is a wonderful place to go. But long term, that's not a viable strategy.
Ted, do you have any insight into this particular question with respect to Chevron? Because I was checking the oil prices, and Mary, which is MEREY for those who want to check it themselves, which is the Venezuelan benchmark, was selling for like $56 a barrel. And if the lifting cost, the break-even costs are 80, that would suggest that even Chevron, which is doing about 200,000 barrels a day, is losing money on its operations. And that makes no sense to me at all. Chevron wouldn't be there if that was the case. Can you explain that apparent contradiction?
Yeah, I think probably what you're looking at is a composite number as opposed to a specific Chevron number. My guess is that Chevron has probably by now recovered most of its capital expenditures, if not all, plus some part of their operating expenditures, and are in the position now where they are basically taking oil out that they've already paid for that barrel. So while everybody else is getting $56 a barrel for their cost for their product, Chevron is as well, but their lifting cost is probably well below that because they have already gotten their profit out, and they're in a position where they're getting a special, they're just making money right now. There's also another issue in there, and that is we don't know what the tax and royalty regime is for Chevron. Probably favorable, or they
Right.
wouldn't be.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. It sounds like the same kind of situation as the Alberta oil sands producers, where once you're there are full cycle costs where you pay all of your capex up front, and all of your other costs. But once the capex is paid off, then your half cycle costs become very, very low. And that it sounds to me like Chevron is in that situation where they produce for well below $56, and so they do okay. But if you're ExxonMobil and you have to go in and then spend money on infrastructure, then you're looking at the $80 break even.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the real problem is, and again, that's the model that is used almost throughout the world. You go into a country, you're the guy that spends the money up front, and then you get a recovery over time. And then once you get your money back, then you get a lower portion of whatever it is that you're putting out there. And but it's almost pure profit at that point, or it should be. And but right now, Exxon is looking at a whole lot of capex. And the problem with that, the additional problem is they don't know what the capex is.
Oh, so it's a big black hole, and they don't
Absolutely.
want to commit to anything until they understand the situation better.
Sure. I mean, look at it. Everybody says that the infrastructure in Venezuela is terrible. Well, that's fine. What does that mean? Do I have to go in and rework a well? Am I simply going to look at putting in a new gathering line? And do I need to drill new wells? Do I have to put more platforms on the lake? Nobody has gotten down to that real interesting set of questions is what does out of, bad infrastructure mean? And no oil company, actually, no human being with a modicum of sense is going to go in there and say, I'll take this over when he has no clue what it's going to cost him.
Ted, I've got a final question for you that I'm hoping you can shed a little light on because Canadians immediately were worried about the Venezuelan oil that's going to China, which is about 400,000 or 500,000 barrels a day, being redirected by the Trump administration into the U.S. Gulf Coast, where a fair amount of Alberta heavy crude is already landing. And then that Alberta crude would be pushed out of the market, and then there's nowhere else for it to go because we don't have enough pipeline infrastructure going to the West Coast. So we'd be in a very, very difficult position. But I don't understand, aside from taking over the Venezuelan government, I don't understand how the Trump administration would redirect that oil because unless they're controlling the state-owned oil company or Chevron, how is there a mechanism whereby that might happen?
No. I mean, maybe they can get the Chevron share, okay? But that's not 400,000 barrels a day. I don't even know what that is for Chevron.
It's
It's
200,000 barrels, roughly 200.
200,000 barrels a day. They might be able to get that. But the Venezuelans are sitting there saying that's our oil. We get to sell it wherever the heck we want to. And unless the administration, the Trump administration, is content with continuing to stop tankers in the middle of the ocean, that's not a good idea. There's no way we can get 400,000 barrels of Venezuelan crude to the Gulf Coast. That's one issue. And then, of course, if you are cutting out the Canadians, gee whiz, they know where they can send their 400,000 barrels. I mean, it'll be a stretch for them to get that to that level of production, but it's not going to hurt them that much.
Well, I think the issue here is that while the Canadian, we just had a study come out last fall by S&P Global, a company you know well,
Yeah.
and so on the Canadian oil sands break evens, and their half cycle costs, because all of the oil sands projects now have paid off their capex, they're all running on half cycle costs, and the average break even is $27 a barrel WTI. And I cannot see for the life of me how Venezuela can produce a barrel under $27 to undercut the Canadians in Houston and Louisiana. I just
No, as you know, I mean the oil price today is like $59 more or less. It varies. And the Canadian oil is selling at a discount from that. I don't know how much it is. That's kind of private information, but they're not selling it at. But they can take a heck of a lot of a discount to get down to $27 before they're losing money. The Venezuelans can't take a discount at all. As a matter of fact, they have to have a premium.
yes, that would be my take on it too, is that the competitiveness of the Canadian oil in the U.S. Gulf Coast is vastly underestimated by the Canadians.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I
Well,
mean,
Ted, this has been terrific. Thank you. They're very insightful. You've cleared up a lot of issues or questions that I had. Thank you very much for this.
happy to do it, Markham. And whenever you need a little bit of someone to sit around and tell lies to you, I'm happy to be here.